second hearing on the amending the economic provisions of the Constitution. We'd like to acknowledge the presence of our colleagues, Senator Grace Poe, the chair of the Senate Committees on Public Services and Economic Affairs. Good morning, ma'am. And Deputy Majority Leader Senator J.V. Hercito, the chair of the Senate Committees on Housing and Local Government. Good morning, sir. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to acknowledge our distinguished guests present. We're fortunate to have with us some of the framers of the 1987 Constitution. Attorney Rene Sarmiento, former Commissioner of the COMELEC. Morning, sir. The eminent economist, Dr. Bernardo Villegas. Good morning, sir. From the legal profession, we have Attorney Jude Ocampo. We have a national scientist, famous economist, Dr. Raul Fabella online. And we have from the chambers, the private sector, the Joint Foreign Chambers, Mr. Julian Payne, President of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Mr. Florian Cotain, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Executive Director of the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, with Mr. Paulo Duarte of ECCP. Good morning. Dr. Joseph Emmanuel Angeles of the Foundation for Economic Freedom. Good morning, sir. Dr. Clarita Carlos. We have Dr. Emmanuel Doy Santos online. From the government agencies, we have NEDA, or National Economic Development Authority, USEC Rosemary Edilion, with USEC Crystal Lin Uy, Philippine Competition Commission Chairperson Michael Aguinaldo, Board of Investments Governor Marjorie Ramos Samaniego, Philippine Economic Zone Authority, OIC Deputy Director General Jenny June Romero, Securities and Exchange Commission Attorney Gerardo Del Rosario. Good morning, Your Honors. I think that's it for now. Justice Antonio Carpio, we see him entering the hall. Morning, Justice. So just to start the hearing off, this is specifically, we wish to focus on the amendment which deals with the public utilities and public services. That's section 11 of Article 12, the National Patrimony and Economy. And as we know, there was a law passed and sponsored by our colleague Senator Grace Poe and co-sponsored by Senator Franklin Drilon, which was approved last March 21, 2022, where a public utility was clearly defined and distinguished from a public service, and the constitutional 60/40 foreign equity limitation was stated to apply to the following public utilities: distribution and transmission of electricity, petroleum and petroleum products pipeline transmission systems, water pipelines, distribution systems, and wastewater pipeline systems, seaports, public utility vehicles. And for 100% foreign ownership to be allowed, including airports, railways, expressways, telecommunications, domestic shipping, subways, tollways. Mention of critical infrastructure, where foreign nationals will not be allowed to own more than 50% of capital unless there is reciprocity accorded in their respective countries to Filipino nationals. And the president was given the power to reclassify a public service as a public utility, among other powers given to the president. But I think the best person to speak on that is our colleague who sponsored the law in 2022, Senator Grace Poe. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank our guests for being here today, also to clarify the issue. Kailangan ba natin ng tsa-tsa para sabihin that we are open for business? Sabi nila, sarado ang ating ekonomiya. Pero ang totoo, bukas naman talaga tayo sa foreign investors. We have made great strides in the past years liberalizing our economy without compromising our national security or leaving behind Filipino businesses. Would amending the public utilities provision in our Constitution open the economy or open a can of worms? Mahalagang mailatag sa diskusyon ang mga naging debate at deliberasyon ng Amended Public Service Act or PSA sa mga sektor na bukas sa kontrol ng dayuhan. We did this to encourage new players in sectors like airports, railways, expressways, and telecommunications. The idea was more competition means better services at better prices. All in all, a win for the Filipino consumers. Without changing the Constitution and guided by the long line of cases decided by the Supreme Court as to what public utilities really are, we carved out public utilities which will remain covered by the 60% Filipino ownership requirement from public services that were opened up by the PSA to full foreign investments. This is a repeat performance of what we did with EPIRA decades ago, where we carved out power generation from public utility. Hindi na po bago ito. Among those we retained under public utilities are industries known as natural monopolies or yung mga industriyang mas mura at cost-effective kung mag-isa lang ang service provider. These are various distribution, transmission, and pipeline systems carrying essentials such as electricity, water, and petroleum. Because of the nature of these natural monopolies, we needed to ensure the security and supply of these essential utilities. Siniguro natin na Pilipino pa rin ang may control sa mga ito at kailanman ay hindi makokontrol ng mga dayuhan. Ensuring seaports under Filipino ownership and control was also a matter of economic and national security. As an archipelago, seaports are the gateways for large-scale transport of people and cargo. First line of defense natin ang seaports laban sa smuggling, piracy, at sa kahit anong banta at seguridad sa ating teritoryo. Panghuli, siniguro natin na Pilipino pa rin ang may control sa tradisyonal at dimakinang pampasaherong sasakyan para maprotektahan ang ating mga tsuper, lalo na ngayon hindi pa maayos ang PUV modernization program. With PSA, we protected the essentials while opening up others to much needed investments. Una na dito ang telecommunications na talagang nangangailangan ng mas pinalawig na kompetisyon para gumanda ang serbisyo at bumaba ang presyo. Through the PSA, we welcomed Starlink to come in and breathe new life to the industry. Actually, yan ang unang-unang permit na binigyan ng National Telecommunications Commission nung pinasa natin ang PSA. Starlink was 0001. At sa ngayon, ang Starlink ang nagbibigay ng signal sa mga unserved at underserved areas. Pati dun sa mga bases natin sa Pag-asa Island, sila ay dumidepende sa Starlink dahil hindi kaya ng mga local telecoms natin. Mabuti na lang meron dahil ang totoo nun, ang signal ng ibang bansa ay mas malakas pa dito sa ating mga teritoryong isla kaysa sa sarili nating mga signals. So kung hindi natin pinayagan ng Public Service Act, walang Starlink dun sa mga lugar na walang signal. Kaya yung mga sinasabi nila, kailangan natin buksan ang ating ekonomiya. Sana pag-aralan muna nila ang itong napasa na nating batas. Bukod pa dito, binuksan din natin ang ating airlines at shipping lines to key investment, networks, and innovation. Kaya ngayon meron ng uling United Airlines flight from the Philippines to the United States. Dahil nadagdagan na naman itong kumpiyansa ng mga mamumuhunan dito sa ating bansa. Napakahalaga nito at lalo na sumigla muli ang industriya sa revenge travel pagkatapos ng pandemya. Doon sa mga nagsasabing, kailangan natin buksan pa ang ating ekonomiya. Yung mga iba bumubulong pa. Sana ang mga dayuhan ay payagan bumili ng lupa dito sa ating bansa. Dahil hindi naman nila madadala ang lupa sa kanilang bayan. Totoo naman yun, di nila kayang buhatin ng lupa. Pero isipin ninyo, kung ang kompetensya natin, ang exchange rate ng pera nila mas mataas dito sa mga Pilipino. Paano na yung mga bagong graduates natin? Paano na yung mga middle class? Makikipagkompetensya. Nung dumami nga ang POGO dito, naging napakamahal ng mga single units dito sa paligid ng Senado na ang aming mga staff na kung ikukumpara mo, mas malaki na ang sweldo kasi sa iba, ay nahihirapan pang magrenta o bumili ng unit. Bubuksan pa natin para sila ay makabili dito? Tignan din natin ang ating mga paliparan on how these can be revitalized through proper capital. We expect to see this realized in the upcoming NAIA rehabilitation. Kung titignan ninyo ang mga bidders natin dito sa NAIA, Kasama dito yung mga nag-ooperate ng Incheon Airport, nag-ooperate ng airport sa Singapore, nag-ooperate ng airport sa Indonesia at sa New Delhi. Sapagkat na niliberalize na natin itong airport sector. As we opened up these sectors, we also place safeguards to protect our national security and interests. For example, we banned corporations owned by other governments from investing in public utilities and critical infrastructure. Halimbawa na lang, yung isang banyaga na kontrolado ang kanilang mga kumpanya ay hindi pwedeng magmay-ari ng telecommunications dito sa ating bansa. Di ko nababanggitin, alam ninyo kung sino yan. Nalagay din dito na tayo ay may reciprocity requirements for critical industries para patas ang kalakaran. Halimbawa, dito sa Pilipinas, pinapayagan natin 100% ownership ng telecommunications. Pero sa ibang bansa na gusto mag-invest dito, hindi naman nila tayo pinapayagan, hindi din natin sila papayagan dito. Diba? Para meron din tayong proteksyon para sa atin. More importantly, binigyan natin ng kapangyarihan ng ating presidente na isuspend o pagbawalan ang kahit na anong transaksyon or investment na magbibigay control sa dayuhan sa isang public service kung ito ay may banta sa ating national security. So kung meron tayong isang bansa na pinagdududahan, kahit na sabihin natin bukas ang ating ekonomiya, pwede nating sabihin, sorry, kayo, hindi namin, wala kaming kumpiyansa sa inyo. Alongside PSA, we are positioned to attract foreign investments through the amended Foreign Investments Act and the Retail Trade Liberalization Act. The amended IRR of the Renewable Energy Act now allows up to 100% foreign investments in renewable energy resources. Filipino companies have partnered with foreign investors for the Mabini Wind Power Project in Batangas and solar power projects in the Pampanga Ecozone. While new investors are coming in, we have yet to see the full benefits of these laws. Sa makatuwid, bukas na ang ating ekonomiya. We have done so, as said by our esteemed statesman, former Senator Frank Drilon, without violating or amending the Constitution. Hindi natin kinailangan mag-con-con, con-as, o peking initiative. Look at the industries we carved out: power, water, seaports, petrol, PUVs. These are the remaining public utilities in the country. Yung Filipino ownership, critical for these sectors. Kung oo, bakit natin bubuksan sa kontrol ng dayuhan ang mga ito? As it stands now, RBH 6 proposes opening through legislation all public utilities to foreign ownership, investments, and even management without the constitutional protection grounded on national security and domestic interest. Hindi lang ito usapin ng pagpasok ng foreign capital at businesses. Tignan din natin ang magiging epekto. Pwedeng tanggalin sa mga Pilipino ang control sa lahat ng sektor na nagbibigay serbisyo sa publiko. Pwedeng makontrol ng ibang bansa ang tubig, kuryente, seaports, gasolina, at public utility jeeps natin. Handa ba tayo dito? Kaya ba natin makipagkompetensya sila? Makakasabay ba ang Pilipino at local businesses sa pagpasok ng foreign competition sa lahat ng industriya? Makakasiguro ba tayo na papasok ang foreign investors, uunlad ang bayan? These are the questions needed to be answered. Nasa pag-amyenda ba ng konstitusyon o palagi na nating sinasabi, nasa pagpapalakad ng ating mga ahensya, pagbawas ng korupsyon kung hindi man tanggalin ng todo-todo, at paglimitan ng bürokrasya. Amending the Public Service Act took several congresses and decades of data gathering and study, countless hours of debates, interpellations, amendments, and discussions were poured in to craft just one particular carving out in our Constitution. Talagang pinag-aralan natin ang pangangailangan at epekto ng pagbukas ng bawat sektor. Kung dumaan sa butas ng karayom ang 86-year-old Public Service Act, mas lalong kailangan nating masunod, masuyod ang pag-amyenda ng ating 37-year-old na Saligang Batas. Kaya maraming salamat sa inyong pagdalo ngayon para liwanagin ang ang ating diskusyon ngayon at sa ating chairman sa pagpayag na magbigay ako ng pangbukas para dito sa ating diskusyon ngayong araw. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Senator Poe, for expounding on the law she sponsored, the public services, the amendments to the Public Services Act, which are very relevant to today's discussions. We'd like to acknowledge also the Deputy Minority Leader, the Chair of the Senate Committee on Women and Children, Senator Risa Ontiveros. Good morning, ma'am. As well as other guests who have just arrived. Department of Finance Undersecretary Bayani Agabin. Morning, sir. DTI Undersecretary Fita Aldaba. Morning, ma'am. From the Australia-New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, Kimi Sui Duar. Morning. I hope I said that correctly. The ICT Assistant Secretary Renato Paraiso. Morning, sir. I think that's it. So we'd like to turn it over to our colleagues, Senator JV, if you have any, Senator Risa, any opening remarks before we turn it over to our guests, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and salamat din sa JV. Magandang umaga po muli sa ating lahat. Maiksi lang po dahil pagpapatuloy lang ng hearing, pero siguro magbibigay na ako ng preview ng aking mga concerns. Ayon mismo sa ilang resource persons sa huling pagdinig, Chacha is divisive and is not worth it. And I agree with them. Pero gusto ko din siya sa atin yung sinabi ng isang resource person na the patrimony provisions in our Constitution as a business model are passé. Laos na ba talaga ang ating saligang batas na nangangalaga sa pang-Pilipinong likas at gawang yaman? Ngayon pong araw, pag-uusapan natin ang public utilities. Alam niyo po, ni-review ko ang mga discussion noong Public Services Act na katatalakay din ni Sen. Grace, and I saw the great care this Senate took when we identified the critical utilities that would still be under the protective mantle of the constitutional provisions on foreign ownership. Sa amyenda natin na ito, pati po ang critical utilities natin fair game na for future Congresses to give away. Yes, even to state-owned foreign companies which pose grave national security risks. Hindi ba't nagalit tayo noon nung lumabas na ang mga manual ng NGCP na may hawak sa ating state grid ay nakasulat sa Mandarin at hindi mabasa ng ating Pilipinong inhinyero? I'm also interested to find out if the problem really is the lack of foreign investments or our chronic failure to address anti-competitive monopolistic behavior. Imbes na basagin ng charter change ang monopolyo ng mga dominant domestic companies, papalitan lang ba sila ng mga dayuhang kumpanya? Ganun din, baka mas malala pa. Baka ang mangyari, tatanggalin natin ang state grid kay C, pero ibibigay naman kay C sa gitna ng malalang alitan sa West Philippine Sea. Naalala ko ang mga ito at naalala ko ang aking tito, the late nationalist economist Alejandro Lichauco, na sinabing imposible ang pag-unlad ng bansa kung kontrolado ng dayuhan ang ekonomiya na bumubuhay dito. A nation that is poor, dependent, exploited, and oppressed by others, he warned, quote, can only have a population of farmers and workers similarly poor, dependent, exploited, and oppressed, closed quote. Salamat po, Mr. Chair, and I'm ready to engage later.
Yes, thank you, Senator Risa. Senator JV.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Anyway, we're here to listen, of course, our resource persons, but I guess our two colleagues have already set the tone on what we want to find out. The Public Services Act was really scrutinized by the Senate and made sure that under our chair, Senator Grace, that it would be for the benefit of the Filipino people to improve our utilities and other infrastructure and others. Likewise, Mr. Chair, we just recently passed the public partnership, public-private partnership code, no, which are all intended to improve our services, infrastructure, energy, and utilities here in the Senate. I think we just have to give these measures the chance that to be realized. So is it really charter change really needed at this point now that these two legislations were already passed, which are intended to improve our utilities and others. Mr. Chair, of course, our energy and infrastructure has really fallen behind. We have fallen behind our ASEAN neighbors. These are requisites for industrialization and development. And the high cost and efficient supply of energy really has really hindered our growth, and we're hope. But as mentioned by our Chair Committee on Public Services, PIRA was enacted in 2001, wherein the Napocor power plants, power generation, transmission, distribution were privatized and was intended to foster to encourage competition. Ang nangyari lang po, yung privatization ang natuloy, yung presyo ng kuryente remained high. Kaya nga sabi ng IPIRA, mukhang ipinera. So we really have to be very careful about all of these things. We cannot rush. We cannot put deadlines. No, we cannot be pressured because it's not very easy to amend the Constitution. No? And so we cannot make mistakes, Mr. Chair. So I agree with you that we will have to be very careful about it. And of course, we want to find out if how can the economic provisions or amendments, the economic provisions improve energy, infrastructure, utilities, much more. Now that we already have passed the Public Services Act, the PPP Code, so do we need really to amend the Constitution at this point? So, Mr. Chair, again, I would like to listen to our resource persons so that we will have a better appreciation of the things that will be taken up today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator JV. Now we'd like to again thank you to our distinguished guests for coming. We'd like to turn it over to our framers of the 1987 Constitution, starting with Commissioner Sarmiento, Dr. Villegas, Justice Carpio afterwards, and Dr. Fabella in that order. So, Commissioner Sarmiento, thank you for coming, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Senator Saligang Batas and the distinguished senators. My friend Risa, good morning. Senator Grace Poe and Senator JV. I prepared a paper for this morning's proceedings entitled "A Single Spark Can Start a Prairie Fire." I express my thanks to the Senate Subcommittee on Resolution of both Houses number 6 for inviting me to this public hearing that has rich consequences for the nation's common good. I humbly raise two questions before the Subcommittee on Resolution of both Houses, and these are: Question A, is it a Solomonic formula in lieu of the system of initiative to revise Articles 12, 14, and 16 of the 1987 Constitution? And letter B, should the Senate and the House of Representatives assemble separately and vote separately as they, through RBH number 6, proposed revisions to Articles 12, 14, and 16 of the 87 Constitution? Now, my answers to the two questions, starting with letter A, Solomonic formula. One, although RBH number 6 has put a stop to the Chacha train via initiative, and the same RBH number 6 has caused many to ponder its implications and impact, I have in my heart of hearts respectful reservations about its wisdom. The first, that revising the economic provisions will not be the Midas touch that will unlock the economic prospects and promise of the Philippines. Much has been written and much has been said in and out of the Senate that what are needed to charm foreign investors to our country are timely and significant alternatives, both legislative and executive initiatives, to address a politicized bureaucracy, decline in the Philippines' score and the rule of law index, dismal level of reading comprehension of pupils that places the Philippines among the poorest in learning in East Asia and the Pacific, expensive electricity, slow internet, not enough seaports for big ships, and others. Next, Moreover, and equally important, Your Honors, for the country's economy to soar high is to unlock the immense human potential and possibilities of Filipinos, their greatness, by further fleshing out the 26 social justice and human rights provisions in the 87 Constitution that start with, quote, the state shall. Yes, external miracles can happen only if there are internal miracles in our country. They both apply to nations and to individuals. Second, revising the economic provisions will be a spark that can start a prairie fire of succeeding amendments concerning political, judicial, social justice, and human rights provisions. After the first 10 amendments to the 1787 Constitution were ratified, more than 11,000 amendments to the US Constitution had been proposed, though only 27 had been ratified. These ratified amendments are inclusive of political, judicial, human rights, and economic issues. The Constitution of India, when it was ratified in 1949, as of September 2023, 106 amendments had been introduced. A spark that is the revision of economic provisions can start a prairie fire of more amendments in the future. My answer to question B about separate assembly and separate voting. Section 1, Article 17 of the 87 Constitution states, quote, that any amendment to or revision of the Constitution may be proposed by 1, the Congress upon a vote of 3/4 of all its members, or referring to initiative. The present Constitution does not say the Congress in joint session assembled, voting separately, may propose amendments in this Constitution, which was provided in Section 1, Article 15 of the 1935 Constitution. The same Constitution that was in operation when the ordinance approved to the 1935 Constitution, or the parity amendment, was adopted in 1947 and effective on July 4, 1949. So ibig sabihin po, ang pinagtutungtungan ng parity amendment is the 1935 Constitution, which provides joint session assembled. The same basis of the decision in Matibag versus Lopez Vito. The 1787 Constitution, the oldest written constitution, which is the model of the 35, 43, 73, and 87 constitutions, and many modern constitutions in the world, declares that an amendment may be proposed either by Congress with a 2/3 majority vote in both houses and the Senate, or by a convention called for by 2/3 of the state legislatures. Now, proposed amendment from the US Congress through a joint resolution, as in our case, is done by the Senate and the House of Representatives, processing the joint resolution like a bill, introduced in either house under the standard legislative process. The only difference between a joint resolution and a bill is that the former, meaning to the joint resolution, once approved, shall not go to the President for approval or veto, but to the Office of the Federal Register for processing and publication, and then forwarded to the governor of its state for submission to state legislatures. So, separate assembly, separate voting in the US Congress. In India, a country whose constitution of 1949 was influenced by the US Constitution, an amendment to the Constitution may be initiated by a bill in either house of Parliament, by a majority of the total membership of that house, and by a majority of not less than 2/3 of the members of the House present and voting. Separate assembly, separate voting. I most respectfully submit. Maraming salamat po. God bless the Senate and the House, and God bless the Philippines.
Thank you very much. Those comments are much appreciated, Commissioner Sarmiento. Thank you. Dr. Villegas, you have the floor, sir.
May express my gratitude for having been invited to this subcommittee. I'd just like to react to the statements already made by Senators Poe, Ontiveros, and Ejercito. First of all, I fully support the statement of Senator Poe that we do not need to amend the Constitution, especially as regards media, advertising, education, and ownership of land at this stage of our development. Right now, we should have a single-minded focus on the scandal that we have 21% of our population living in dehumanizing poverty. That's a scandal because all of our neighbors in Southeast Asia have single-digit poverty incidents. And how do we approach this problem? As I see it, there are two major challenges to this administration. And I'm glad that the focus, at least in theory, is being made. First, agricultural productivity, food security, to really address the decades-old neglect of agriculture and the countryside. And I have a target for this administration. It's good news that for the first time in 2023, in all 4 quarters, agriculture production was not negative. Actually, that was not the case for many years before the present administration. You would find a lot of quarters before this with agriculture actually decline. If you take a look at the most recent GNP figures, in all quarters it was positive, and the average for the whole year was a 1.2. My target for this administration is by the second half of the administration, they must increase agricultural production at least by 3% a year, which is what our neighbors, Vietnam and Thailand, have been achieving over the last 10 years. I'm sure you know that agriculture is very difficult to grow faster than 3%. You know, calamities, diseases, and so on and so forth. So it's not too much to ask this present administration. And I see that they're laying the foundation for farm consolidation, diversification of products, digitalization, and industrialization. These are the strategies that I support. Now, they will not in any way change the potential of growth, which this present administration has to achieve at least 8% before their administration is through. As you very well know, NEDA has always been talking about as high as 8%. And I think that is possible, number one, if we grow agriculture at least 3% per year. And most importantly, it is an answer to Senator Ontiveros, we get $15 to $20 billion worth of foreign direct investments, which are very essential in today's circumstances. I'm sure those of us who look at the gross national product data know that we are also notorious for having the lowest savings rate in this part of the world. We save only 10% of our GNP. Do you know what is the average among our neighbors? Anywhere from 25 to 35%. Actually, China saves more than 35% of their GNP. Therefore, we have very little capital to invest in long-term infrastructures and other essential projects. That's why, yes, today we need to attract. And again, I set a target of $15 to $20 billion every year. And it was good news that we just heard that out of the $72 billion pledges that President Marcos has been obtaining in all these trips, $14 billion have actually already been implemented. So $15 to $20 billion every year for the remaining years of the Marcos administration are not too much to us. Do you know what Vietnam got last year in FDIs? 25 billion. And they've been averaging 15 to 20 billion for the last 5 years because they opened up 100% foreign ownership of foreigners as early as 2014. Vietnam is a socialist economy. but they have been embracing foreign investment a lot more than we have. That was changed by the public amendment of Public Service Act. And I fully agree with Senator Poe that it's more than enough. If you take a look at the composition of these $14 billion that have been implemented, they're manufacturing, infrastructures, alternative energy, BPO IT, all sectors 100% open to foreign investment. If we open advertising, media, education, they will be literally chicken feed. They are not capital intensive and they will not impact on poverty as infrastructure, manufacturing, BPO IT have been. So it's clear that it is not time to have an amendment of the Constitution. Finally, let me say that from all the road shows that I've been conducting over the years, and that's what I've been doing most of the time, going with private sector people, with trade chambers, going to Spain, Japan, and others, my feedback is those who want to invest in agriculture here do not require land ownership. They always lease their land. And right now, what we need are more Del Montes, Doles, into mangoes, avocados, coffee, cacao, bamboos. That's the way to increase agricultural productivity in a significant way. The government has to focus on helping the small farmers. Yes, practically all the resources of the government should be focused on helping the farmers because they are the poorest of the poor. But that is a poverty eradication initiative. It doesn't impact so much on productivity. Productivity will be improved if we have what is now happening happily, more and more large corporations, the Pangilinans, the Bengets, the Consunihis, the Renzos, are investing in large tracts of land for coconut, for bamboos, for palm oil. And in fact, I see this as an accomplishment already of this present administration. In the past, I'm sure you know, especially those who are in the banking sector, a lot of these corporations rather paid hundreds of millions of penalty not to invest in agri-agra. Now, that mood has changed. More and more of large corporations see profit as possible in agriculture. Those are the things that have been made possible already by PSA, Amendment PSA. I don't think we need to change at the moment. In the future, I may agree that probably we should completely open all the rest, but they're not critical. Therefore, I do not think that we need the cha-cha today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Villegas. Next, we have Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Justice Carpio was the ponente of many of the cases decided by the Supreme Court regarding the Constitution. Good morning, Justice.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Your Honors. Thank you for inviting me on this topic. The proponents of the present People's Initiative blame the restrictive provisions, economic provisions of the Constitution for the low foreign direct investments, the high unemployment, and the slow economic growth of our country. These are all false reasons. The Philippines today has one of the most liberal foreign investment laws in ASEAN as well as in Asia. The Philippines, without amending the Constitution, has passed several laws to open the economy to 100% foreign ownership. The recently amended Public Service Act reclassified several businesses as public services open to 100% foreign ownership. Local banks are open to 100% foreign ownership under Republic Act 10641. Retail trade is open to 100% foreign ownership under the amended Republic Act 8762, subject, of course, to reasonable minimum requirements on capital. And the generation of renewable energy, solar and wind, has just been opened to 100% foreign ownership under the DOE circular amending the IRR of Republic Act 1995-13. So it's not even a law. In particular, the amended Public Service Act allows 100% foreign ownership in telecommunications, air, sea, and land transportation, except PUVs, and airports. Power generation has always been open to 100% foreign ownership for the longest time. There appears to be a lack of understanding by our national leaders of the extent of foreign ownership under the law of businesses in our country. In an interview, President Marcos Jr. declared that he wants to open the economy to foreign investments, and I quote, except in critical areas such as power generation. Power generation from coal, oil, and gas plants has been open to 100% foreign ownership for the longest time. The Supreme Court has also allowed 100% foreign ownership of power generation from dams or hydropower plants. President Marcos Jr.'s own Department of Justice and Department of Energy have recently allowed, through a mere implementing guideline, 100% foreign ownership of power generation from solar and wind, which is, as natural resources are under the Constitution owned by the state. Let us compare the foreign investment laws of the Philippines, China, and Vietnam on telecommunications. Under the amended Public Service Act, foreigners can own now 100% of telecom companies in the Philippines. China at present only allows 49% foreign ownership in landline and cellular phone companies. Vietnam also allows only 49% foreign ownership in landline and cellular phone companies. On land ownership, let us look at our neighbors, China and Vietnam. Even their own citizens cannot own land. Their own citizens can own only a leasehold for 75 years. In Thailand, foreigners cannot own land, but there is a small exception, up to 1,600 square meters, but only if there is a treaty with another country allowing Thai people to buy land in that other country. And there is no such treaty at present. So in Thailand, foreigners cannot own land. In Indonesia, foreigners cannot own land. They can only acquire a leasehold. So we are better because we allow a corporation 40% owned by foreigners to own land. And frankly, land ownership is not a requirement for investors to invest in a country. If you are a manager, you're sent to the Philippines and you recommend to your board in New York that you should buy the land on which your plant is going to be built, you will be fired because you don't have to spend that much to use the land. You need only 25-year lease, and you don't want more than 25-year lease because in 25 years, the labor situation might change. The labor in the Philippines could be more expensive than the next country. So they don't want to buy land actually, foreign investors who are engaged in manufacturing. Now, to add, what is the real problem of our low FDI? There are three causes. First, the high cost of power. We have the highest power rate in ASEAN and the second highest power rate in Asia, next only to Japan. In manufacturing, energy accounts for at least 30% of your cost. And if you locate your plant here in the Philippines, you cannot compete with your competitor in Vietnam because they have low power rates. They will never come to the Philippines. So we have to address this number one problem. The second problem is our bureaucratic regulation. To put up a factory, you have to, in the Philippines, you have to get a permit from the barangay, from the mayor, from the department in charge of the business you're in, and the specialized agency that may also regulate you. In Vietnam and China, you go only to one office and you get all your permits. The third cause of the low FDI is our infrastructure. Our infrastructure is behind our neighbors. Our airports, seaports, land transportation, sea transportation. We have to address the real causes. The real cause is not the Constitution. Nobody cares. The president has been going abroad and has been saying, I have secured almost 500 billion pesos in foreign investment. And not one of those foreigners who plan to invest here required an amendment of our Constitution. That is all, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to present my position.
Thank you very much, Justice Carbio. After Dr. Fabella, we'll go to Dr. Braid, who is online, also a framer of the 87 Constitution, and then Chairman Aguinaldo, Dr. Carlos, and some of our friends from